In 1978, a star was born. Which star, you ask? Project Stargate. That was the code name for a secret U.S. Army unit established in 1978 in a small wooden barracks in Fort Meade, Maryland, run by the Defense Intelligence Agency of all people. In charge of it, Major General Albert Stubblebine. There were several sister projects being run at the same time as Stargate and preceding Stargate. Those programs, Gondola Wish, Grill Flame, Center Lane, Sunstreak, and Scanate, all operated until 1991 when they were consolidated and rechristened as the Stargate Project. Stargate Project worked primarily in the remote viewing arena. The project was terminated in 1995 when the CIA reported that the project had no significant use in intelligence operations. But documents reflect a very different story. Documents released just this year in 2017 in the CIA archives reflect a completely different story, a story of intrigue. And let me explain to you why. The power of these remote viewers is amazing. You can't believe, unless you've seen it with your own eyes, what they can do and what they have morphed into today. And I'm serious. They have morphed. 2 weeks ago, I talked a little bit about MK Ultra, the remote viewing, and an operation called Operation Sandman. The Sandmen are nothing more than remote viewers. The remote viewers are given targets. They search those targets, they find those targets, and through their power of suggestion, they take those targets and cause them to die. What, you say? What do you mean they cause them to die? The remote viewers are able to mold the thinking patterns of their target into the target committing suicide. It was that simple. They're given coordinates, the target is found, and the remote viewer goes to work. It's something out of science fiction, I know. Thus the name Stargate. We see in the TV series Stargate, where there's travel back and forth. We're going to talk about time travel. We're going to talk about the Stargate Project. We're going to talk about the CIA documents released that tell a completely different story as opposed to the official story. We talked about the MK Ultra program and how it ended and 2 quietly began. MK Ultra 2, that was simply referred to as 2. And the mind control portion of MK Ultra moved in and morphed into a remote viewing aspect and a remote viewing control aspect. The MK Ultra project itself, you've heard a lot out there, about the MK Ultra, about the mind control. There were over 40,000 people involved, mostly involuntarily and not knowing, in the MK Ultra project, the initial MK Ultra 1. They consisted of children, male and female, teenagers, young adults, adults and senior citizens, military personnel, federal prisoners. The spectrum was huge in the MK Ultra program, and primarily, although they don't admit to it, drugs were used with these people to achieve the controlling aspect of what they were asked to do under mind control. That morphed into something a little different. That morphed into they were able to discern that there were some with greater talents than others, and those with the greater talents were moved over in what was called 2, MK Ultra 2. And MK Ultra 2 was primarily concerned in remote viewing, the ability to see in the distance and sometimes in the future. That's a task that was unknown at the time. But these remote viewers could physically control other human beings. And as their talents developed, they found that not only could they control other human beings, they can control objects. They can control signals. And so that's what we're going to get into today. We're going to get into what's called electronic perturbation. Originally, they were looking at the ability of a remote viewer or a human subject to actually perturb an electronic signal, just interfere with the electronic signal. But as time progressed and as abilities progressed, they saw even more. They saw that these subjects were actually able to interact by mental means alone with sensitive electronic equipment. And so the project moved forward. They were trying to ascertain how this phenomena might be used as a weapon. That's right. Let me read you some of this. In this report, we consider the possible production of individuals of physical effects, such as perturbation of sensitive electronic equipment that appears to be well shielded against or otherwise inaccessible to human influence. Look at that. They're talking about human beings being able to integrate with a signal and influence that signal. Electronic signal. That is shielded. A shielded electronic signal. The precedent for considering whether sensitive electronic equipment can be influenced as a result of a remote perturbation phenomena has been established. CIA report. Secret. This ought to be beyond secret. This ought to be beyond top secret. The source of true random electronic output was established. How could this possibly be used as a weapon? Well, let's look at it. Going back a little bit, we have to understand how these remote viewers were actually trained. Sometimes they were given coordinates, map coordinates. As time progressed and we got GPS on board, they were trained in GPS coordinates, in reading GPS coordinates, understanding where these coordinates would fall on the map. So a target could be as simple as looking at a GPS coordinate, looking at a map coordinate, and the remote viewer would explain to the controller what is being seen in that zone. Let's give you an example. Okay, I'm going to give coordinates of an island in the South Pacific and an airport on that island. And I want that remote viewer to look at that island, to look at that airport. What do you see there? Well, I see a lot of airplanes. Let's pick out an airplane. Which airplane do you want to pick out? Well, let's pick out an Air Asia airplane. Maybe one that's getting ready to taxi. Okay, let's take that. Let's take that aircraft ready to taxi. Now, follow that aircraft. Can you see that aircraft? Tell me about that aircraft. And the remote viewer would tell him about the aircraft. The remote viewer would tell him about what's going on inside the aircraft, what the pilot and co-pilot are currently doing, what the remote viewer hears, actually hearing the electronic signals from air traffic control, the voices, hearing people talk. That remote viewer can actually zoom in on people inside the aircraft and hear their conversations. Crazy, isn't it? You think it really happened that way? I guarantee it really happens that way, not happened. They may have said that Stargate is no longer functional, and it probably isn't, as Stargate has a new name now. I don't know what that is, but I guarantee if they progress that far from the 40s, mid-40s, when MK Ultra and when Paperclip was first begun, all the way to the end of Stargate, I guarantee you there's more progression today in the human mind. Look how much of the human mind we use, 10%, and those remote viewers use a bit more. So here we are, we're following that aircraft. the controller says, "Can you take control of that aircraft?" The remote viewer says, "What do you mean take control? I don't know how to fly." Well, can you turn off communications? Where are communications? The remote and the controller will tell him, "See that switch down there between the two pilots? Switch that radio off." They switch that radio off. Off goes the transponder. What more can he do? You know, aircraft today are fly-by-wire. What does that mean? Does that mean that a cable actually goes from the cockpit control facility back to the control entities? No, it means it's an electronic signal being sent. So if one can interfere with an electronic signal, one can actually take control of flight controls from a distance. Are there possible tests that have been done with that in the past? Maybe a couple years ago, huh? Maybe an aircraft was flown without the control of the pilots. Maybe oxygen was turned off to that aircraft so that everyone on board at 37,000 feet died within 3 minutes without oxygen. And perhaps that remote viewer could control that aircraft, not really knowing where it's going because they're not a navigational expert, but just controlling it until it runs out of gas and falls out of the sky. Maybe that could happen. Just maybe that did happen. I don't know, I can't say, but I can say that by using this document and talking about the abilities of these remote viewers, but they're more than remote viewers. What could they be called today? Remote controls? Who knows? Wouldn't you love to get your hands on up-to-date documents from these guys? And here's a tagline for you. In the CIA report of their success is what they have to say. Considering the current ability of our own remote viewers to penetrate secure facilities, we feel that it is important to develop such a detector system. They're talking about systems that will detect RP intrusion, the perturbation and the viewing systems. Pretty telling, isn't it? We can see the application of this. I mean, we have probably seen it being used, just haven't realized it. You know, we can go back to events of the past where certain things have happened and the person who perpetrated these events had no history of this type of activity. You can look at someone who shot the President of the United States. Didn't recall having done such a thing, but he did it. We can look at someone who killed the Prime Minister of Israel. Student didn't recall doing it, but he did it. Can they claim insanity? Perhaps with these documents they can claim control, mind control, manipulation by the CIA, by the Defense Intelligence Agency, or by the U.S. federal government. But here again, the United States isn't the only country that has these abilities. The MK Ultra program was instituted because of information that the Soviet Union and China already had these programs in place. So we have an all-new battlefront, don't we? With these talented, gifted war machines sitting around the world. Something we need to take care of, or be careful of. Something we need to be aware of. More than anything. And perhaps, just perhaps, you may have been around someone or may have been an unintentional target of one of these war machines. If you heard ringing in your ears, a sensation of ringing, buzzing, hissing, chirping, whistling, other sounds, can be intermittent, can sound like in beat and sync with your heart pulsating. Many times doctors will call it tinnitus. But sometimes, just sometimes, it could be something else.